Just going to move to the next slide, and we're just inviting everyone to think about who you are and how does in a working context and how does that impact the workspace? What do you carry to work internally and externally? So it would be great if someone wants to have a verbal response, but also feel free to message in the chat. I mean, to spend a while thinking about it. That can be quite a philosophical question, actually. Who are you?
You. Yeah, what differences do you have that may be different from those around you? So I think it was Stephanie who was mentioning that they made comments on her resting face. And yeah, what was Stephanie bringing to the workplace that was different from what they were maybe used to? Had they ever had an experience of working with a Black woman before? I'm assuming that Stephanie's Black. And are those stereotypical views of an angry Black woman? I always think of, the film, The Diary of a Mad Black Woman. Like, there's just a connotation sometimes that I think society, when they don't have a lot of experience with Black women, they may bring something or make an assumption about Black women.
Or Black men.
Or Black men. I can only speak about being a woman because that's the only, I'm only identifying as a woman.
So yeah, I guess I just want to invite everyone to share again. So who are you? How do you show up in the workspace? Do you feel like you mute yourself? Are there certain behaviors you might have realized that you might be doing in order to minimize yourself? And like, what does your difference mean in the office, in your workspace, or as an alumni, if you've finished your internship? And actually, what do you think about if you're about to go into an internship? How do you want to be seen?
Don't be silent. I think the examples we had earlier are both people showing their or having experiences of people's biases.
That goes back to sort of remembering the truths about yourself. I think that's one way I've seen clients really overcome the bias or the racism or the prejudice that they've faced in working spaces in the UK and in Europe.
Yes, it was Richard's scenario with the interview. I'm just trying to remind myself of his name. So we definitely, before you even got into the work environment, you faced some bias. So, and that was, I think, an introduction into, you didn't actually tell us whether you got the job or not, Richard.
And I guess that maybe brings me on to thinking about a conversation we were having last week about concrete ceilings. And, you not only face it because you're a person of color, like you face it because you're a woman as well. And we're all aware of glass ceilings, quite a common term, but concrete ceiling.
Yes, so I had a conversation on a podcast about just the challenges of my guest was a Black woman who works in the media industry, been working in that industry for over 20 years. And she was the one who actually introduced me to the concrete ceiling because I'd never heard of it described like that. So what she was saying was that white women have a glass ceiling. So that means that there's a certain level that we can get to, not we, but that a white woman in her professional career can get to. But the ceiling is glass, so that means that she can see where it
It's
is that she needs.
transparency.
There's
Yeah.
transparency, there's being able to actually see where she's trying to attain to. And when it comes to our Black women, there's a concrete ceiling. And my guest was describing this, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was like, I don't know. It was very impactful to hear that, because it's a complete contrast to a glass ceiling, because one, you can't see it, one, you can't smash it as easily. And it just kind of highlights the ongoing challenges that Black women face in the workplace. So yes, we were exploring the concrete ceiling, and my kind of suggestion is that we get a sledgehammer and break that thing down. But yes, it was an interesting discussion anyway, talking about that.
I think as well, when you think about sometimes all the things that global majority people have to navigate to get into those spaces, it's really great that 10K are here pushing those boundaries, I think. And I know that's something that the organization is roots are on that. So just navigating those workspaces, and part of these talks is giving everyone a space to understand that you're not alone in facing those difficulties. I've definitely faced those barriers before being a psychotherapist. I was a teacher, and can see how that those negativities, or that those demoralizing comments can be based in a really young age at first. And it kind of speaks to institutes, doesn't it, really, and what institutes can do to people. So yeah, I'm realizing that no one said anything. So I'm going to move to the next slide. And I would encourage everyone to put a comment. Just let us know how you found the time. And just a summary. So let's summarize. So we thought about what cultural competency is today and how that can impact the working space. But also we did some reflecting about what kind of things we might be carrying. So what might be carry from job to job? What experiences might we have had that kind of can hamper our communication? Maybe thinking about as well, what other cultural biases do we have? And what do we enter the working space with?
And I think it's really important. The last slide was asking who you are, and although people didn't interact with it, it's something that you maybe need to think about. You need to think about, there's no one, I'm not, you could do as much training as you want to. We all have biases, we have prejudices, we have preconceived beliefs about different people, different cultures. And when we're asking who are you, it's thinking about those things, because you need to be aware of those, and because that impacts the way that you show up and how you interact with other people. So it is that you maybe need to do some work around those unconscious biases that you do have, so that when you go into the workplace, you don't look or act like the video that we showed you, making really inappropriate and insensitive comments about people's cultures. And I think it's also to think about it in all of the terms that we described, the different dimensions of diversity. We don't just make assumptions because somebody is 50 years old that they are going to be a certain way, or that, I'm trying to think of the last dimension of diversity. It was, so this gender, disabilities. I think sometimes we hear disability and we think that somebody is not able to do something. Neurodiversity, if you don't understand or you haven't heard that term, please read it up, because it's becoming more and more part of everyday language. I think it wasn't termed in that way previously, but now we do have a name for it, and it's something that we can't see. So it may be that somebody has ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism. There's a lot of neurodiverse people in this world who thrive, and you may not be aware of what it is that they what their superpower is. That's how I like to call it, because it makes them different, but it also makes them have abilities that, I'm trying to remember what's the opposite of neurodiversity?
Neurotypical.
Neurotypical, that's the word. Thank you. So yes, a neurotypical person may not have the same superpowers. So these are terms that we need to kind of be aware of. We also need to be aware of, sexual identity, people referring to pronouns in the right way. You need to be aware of what the culture is in the workplace that you're going into, and make sure that you are, using the right terminology so that nobody's going to get offended or end up, wanting to take a grievance out because you didn't use the right term. You didn't say they instead of saying he or she. So yeah, there's lots to be aware of and to kind of just educate yourself on.
I think as well, thinking about how we can be resilient when we face those comments or we face those discriminations is really helpful. And that's not to preempt every new situation we go into, but actually somehow gathering strength in realizing that actually I got through that before, and just realizing what comments to react with and challenge and what comments not to. Not everything we need to react on, as much as it is irritating. To be on the other hand of really insensitive cultural comments. So I'm gonna open up the floor. Do we have any comments before that? In anything in the chat? We do? No, okay. So now it's part of the session where we give you some time to actually be able to have a conversation with Janine and myself. So I just want to thank Julie and her team. And if you could scan the QR code and give us some feedback, that'd be great. Is there anyone that maybe wants to have a one-to-one with us? We're more than happy to do that, as I'm really realizing it's past 7 o'clock now.
Feel free to ask any questions in the chat, or you can have your mic turned on, or if you prefer to speak to us one-to-one after the session, just let us know in the chat so that we know to stay back.